So over the weekend, Brian Stelter responded to a fellow named Jim Earl on Twitter. Now, some of you may recognize Jim Earl's name. He is a writer for the Jimmy Dore Show, just like myself. So I'll give a full disclaimer there. Obviously, I'm partial to Jim on this one. He's a colleague of mine and a friend. But here's what happened over on Twitter, and Brian Stelter actually responded to him. I thought this would be interesting to talk about. All right. So Jim Earl, Sanders campaign manager. So what happened? He retweeted Brian Stelter. Brian Stelter says, more of my conversation with Bernie Sanders campaign manager in just a moment. Jim retweets that. He goes, Sanders campaign manager makes the obvious observation that CNN and MSNBC are paid by the pharmaceutical and bank industries. Brian Stelter responds he doesn't know what ads run during his show. Then cuts to 2 ads for pills and Discover Card. And then he says to Brian, you're either a liar or incompetent. Brian responds to him, maybe I'm incompetent, but I don't know what ads run during the show. I don't see them. Other anchors of other shows don't see them either. I see a black screen during commercial breaks. And now some people are kind of getting on Jim's case here. They're kind of tone policing Jim. And where's my, I actually responded to this too. And full disclaimer, I made a spelling error. Let's see if mine's, I don't see mine. Okay. Well, I responded to this as well, and I actually made a spelling error. And what I said was, I was like, you're not incompetent, Brian. You're doing what your employer wants you to do, which is, which is kind of pretending like you don't really know the issue of the corporate media and kind of wearing a blindfold when it comes to it. Keep in mind, Brian Stelter was on a panel, and I believe it was Phil Donahue, called him out on how the media loves Trump because Trump's good for ratings. Brian Stelter responded that the media, the for-profit corporate media, doesn't care about ratings. And everybody laughed in his face, which is what you should do when Brian Stelter refers to himself as a media watchdog. You should laugh in his face because that's a joke. Now, some folks in this Twitter thread, because keep in mind, Brian Stelter has about 600,000 followers on Twitter, I believe, about 600,000 followers. Jim has about 5,000. So, when Brian Stelter weighed in on there, he got some support, obviously. And it was mostly people just tone policing Jim. So you want to tone police Jim? Okay, if that's what you want to focus on, that's on you. But let's look at the substance here of what he talked about. So basically, Brian Stelter claims he doesn't know what ads run during a show. And then you hear ads for pills, which is Big Pharma, and Discover Card, which, by the way, pharmaceutical and bank industries, right? So Sanders' campaign manager was right. Brian Stelter was playing dumb. Now, here's Brian Stelter. He's saying, I don't know what ads run during the show. I don't see them. So his response is, we don't actually see the ads. We just see a black screen. I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's the case. But here's the thing. Brian Stelter runs a show called Reliable Sources. Reliable Sources is a media watchdog show. Brian Stelter is supposed to be, he's not. I mean, the idea of it is comical, but Brian Stelter is supposed to be a media watchdog. So here you have a supposed media watchdog on Twitter openly admitting they don't know information that should be required information 101 to do their job. I'm a media watchdog. Okay, here's the media outlet who is your employer. Should you maybe know who funds them? No, that's not necessary. It isn't. It's not necessary to know who is advertising and thus funding a media outlet you're supposed to hold accountable. Are you serious? Especially when it's a for-profit entity that is focused on pleasing advertisers above all else, which the corporate media, that is the business model they follow by their own admission. Jeff Zucker of CNN admits we want to make our advertisers and our shareholders happy. That's our first priority. Did he say that verbatim in those words? No. But he has made it very clear. You can find snippets of him. That's his priority. That's why he took money out of journalism, invested it into more talk shows, just straight up talk shows, because he says that's what the advertisers and shareholders want. And you're Brian Stelter, and you're supposed to hold this organization accountable, make sure they're committed to news and information. And you don't need to know who these advertisers are. You don't need to know who these special interests are. You don't need to know. It's not necessary information to know that oil and gas advertises on cable news. Why do they advertise on cable news? Do you think people know if they don't put gas in their car, it doesn't go vroom? People know that. Gasoline doesn't need to get the word out. People know. People know they need it. People are buying it. So what are they buying? They're buying favorable coverage. They're buying that when earthquakes are caused by fracking, the corporate media is not going to talk about it. They're buying that when there's climate change protests all over the world, the media is going to trivialize it. They're buying that when there's another spill, they downplay it. That's what they're buying. They're buying that you're not going to see constant coverage of what's going on in Flint, Michigan, or other cities in the U.S., and there are others too that are having similar water crises. Flint still doesn't have clean water. That should be a headline every single day, every single hour on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. It's not. Why? Because oil and gas advertises with these institutions that aren't committed to news at all. Jim Earl is pointing out that Brian's either lying that he's not aware of this stuff, or he's completely incompetent. Why? Because it's his job to know this stuff. It's his job to know. If somebody told me Chuck Todd has no idea who the advertisers on MSNBC are, I would believe that. Just because I do think Chuck Todd is that clueless. And I mean, Chuck Todd is a C-level actor who plays a news reporter every night. And I say C-level actor because, honestly, I'm not convinced he's very good at playing a news reporter. I'm not convinced he knows anything about news. A good actor would convince me otherwise, that they're a great news reporter. Chuck Todd's an actor. Brian Stelter is supposed to be a media watchdog. That's his job that he gets paid handsomely to do. And he's openly admitting in a public forum on Twitter, here, let's read the tweet one more time. Maybe I'm incompetent, but I don't know what ads run during the show. I don't see them either. Other anchors of other shows don't see them either. I see a black screen during the commercial breaks. So you don't know who the advertisers are on CNN, the institution you're supposed to hold accountable. Hey, I'm a media watchdog. Should I know? No, you don't need to know. And people in this thread are busy tone policing Jim because he used the word liar. Instead of, hey, our media structure can't even happen in other countries. The media structure we have here in the United States, where it's just a corporate giveaway, no strings attached, can't even happen in other countries. It happens here. And Brian Stelter, one of the watchdogs, doesn't even know about it. He doesn't care. He doesn't know. He's like, oh, I just look at a black screen and I don't ask questions. Yes, that is Brian Stelter. If he was an actual media watchdog, he is incompetent. Yes. But as far as his employer is concerned, he's not incompetent. He's doing exactly what they want. They want someone who's complicit, who's not going to ask questions, and who's going to completely deflect when they're called out for something so obvious. I just see a black screen. I see no problem here. The corporate media doesn't care about ratings. That's what CNN wants in a media watchdog, and Brian Stelter, he does a great job at filling that role. He's the media watchdog CNN wants. He's not the media watchdog this country or any democratic experiment needs. He's a media watchdog the same way Barney Fife is a police officer.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your